Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Daily Dizzle for January 4th, 2011. The second weekday edition of the Daily Dizzle of the new year. It is Tuesday, in case you didn't know that day. I am always in Tommy Dizzlemits. I'm taking it lazy today. Don't really have any particular things I want to talk about, other than some of the stuff we mentioned yesterday. I mean, I said we could break down the weekend box office numbers, but all you really have to know about them is the family movies did really well. Because going into Monday was the first day a lot of schools were back in session. So, and now the numbers don't lie. If you didn't believe that everyone was back at school at this point, just for a comparison of last week when everyone was off, the number one movie at that time was Little Fockers. Made $8.4 million for the day. This past Monday, it only ended up making $2.4 million. I mean, that's still a lot, making a couple million during the day. But obviously, it's because there's school going on that cuts into a lot of the times where people could be going to see theaters. Work is back in session for a lot of people since they're already coming off of their vacations. But yeah, Little Fockers wasn't even number one yesterday. True Grit managed to leapfrog it one more time. Over the weekend, the only reason Little Fockers was number one for the weekend was the strong Saturday bump, and it still was slightly ahead on Sunday. But True Grit was number one on Friday and has actually reclaimed the throne right now. It made $2.6 million on Monday compared to $2.4 million for Little Fockers. Number 3, Tron Legacy, is still hanging around in there. Made an extra $2.3 million. It has crossed $130 million. People were saying it was probably going to be a bust and not make back its $170 million budget. That has been blown out of the proportions. At this point, even, I think Disney has just commissioned a prequel TV series to be put on the Disney Channel to kind of explain what happened between Tron, the original, and Tron Legacy. So they're going to be whoring that one out for a little while. Way to go, Disney. Coming in at number 4, and right behind it at number 5, we've got the two Oscar contenders, or the early Oscar contenders. Number 4, Black Swan, ended up making just below $1.5 million on the day from 1,500 theaters. The Fighter might be at almost 1,000 more theaters, but it had only $1.3 million for the day. As we said, that's going to bounce back and forth. They're still within $2 million of each other. That's how it's going to be this whole time, at least up until the Oscars. Then depending on which one gets shafted on nominations, you might see one blow the other out of the water. And it looks like the rest of the top 10 are pretty much rounded up by family movies, at least most of them. Number 6, Yogi Bear, made another $1.2 million. It hasn't been a great success story, but it's still making money for Warner Brothers, and that's really what matters at the end of the day. So maybe we'll get a Yogi Bear too, but probably direct-to-video. Number 7, Tangled. Tangled has been out for 6 weeks at this point, and it's still pulling in over $1 million a day. That's, it might not be on the level of old Disney like The Lion King and things like that. It might not even be on the level of Toy Story 3 and Finding Nemo. But Disney is continuing to show that even though they're not going to make princess movies anymore, they still get consistent box office returns if they do the movie right. Number 8, The Chronicles of Narnia 3, still hanging in there. It's at $88 million right now. Made an extra $1 million yesterday. It's definitely going to cross $100 million. Though it's funny because that was released by Fox, and if you look at the more recent movie release from Fox, which is actually at about 100 more theaters, Gulliver's Travels, which was released over Christmas, it's still 2 positions lower than Chronicles of Narnia 3, and still making less than at the box office on a daily basis. How they can release a movie that has more advertising than the Stablemate, and the Stablemate that's older ends up still being ahead, kind of speaks to the quality that maybe Gulliver's Travels isn't a good movie. But to end that rant, number 8, like we said, Chronicles of Narnia 3, made an extra $1 million. Number 9, The King's Speech, made just under $1 million for the day. That one, I think it's already starting to make back its budget, if it hasn't already, and the Oscars are only going to help it. That's one that's had the longest playing season so far out of any of the Oscar contenders. It was at a couple theaters for a little while. They were debating if they were going to put it into a wider release, and it took like 5 weeks, but they eventually did, and that is paying off in spades for the Weinstein Company. And as we said, Gulliver's Travels, $930,000 it took in to be number 10. And just to show you what the other movies are that are a little bit more popular, The Tourist was number 11, just outside the top 10, making over $800,000. Number 12, The Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 1. I don't know why everyone's seeing it when they know there's going to be a part 2. You kind of know that things are going to be left off, and you can just read the book if you really want to. But I guess they split the book into 2 parts, so if you read the book, you ruin both movies. So, way to go, Warner Brothers, for creating the most confusing bumblefuck of a marketing campaign ever around that. Regardless, it still made another $600,000 today. It's sitting north of $284 million. It's probably not going to cross $300 million, but even if it doesn't, you can bet part 2 might. Number 13, How Do You Know? We just have to touch on that only because it is the movie that cost $120 million to make with no special effects, just Reese Witherspoon, Jack Nicholson, Paul Rudd, and them. Owen Wilson as well. It looks like they all just got the most money they could at the perfect time of their career. That movie has made just under $26 million at this point, so it's got a long ways to go to make $120 million total. Yeah. Gotta love Sony. Any money that they might have made this year when they released The Karate Kid, they definitely lost on this one, so... So now to move from the box office grosses from Monday to the new DVD releases for Tuesday. This week we had a couple middle-of-the-road titles coming out. We'll cover them from lowest grossing to highest grossing. First we had Catfish, which was that Facebook movie that wasn't The Social Network. It was like the documentary chronicling the one person who was going to meet up with the other one that they had met online. That just sounds fucking creepy and awkward of the concept of a movie. Especially when you realize that it's just going to get to them meeting up, being like, oh, hey, I talked to you before, huh? You talk for 5 minutes and then probably don't have anything else to talk about, and that's probably the end of the goddamn movie. Don't need to see a movie to know that Facebook fucks up the way that we interact with each other. Good to see that someone can make a couple $1 million off that concept, though. On to the next new release for the week. We have Case 39. That was a horror movie with Academy Award winner Renee Zellweger that came out a couple months ago. It had been sitting on the shelf for like 2 years. It made $13 million. Of course, it came out against Let Me In, which was the highest reviewed horror movie of the year, and that only made $12 million. So it looks like being able to advertise your movie as featuring an Oscar winner gives it that extra $1 million bump. So keep that in mind if you're ever going to work in Hollywood or if there's any executives watching this right now. Academy Award equals $1 million extra. On to the next highest grossing one, Machete. Came out in September, made about $26 million at the box office, which was more than the Grindhouse movies that had inspired it, since it was one of the fake trailers. So very rare that you have a spin-off that exceeds the originals in some way like that. So Machete already made some money for Fox, and they're going to get some more out of it by putting it out on DVD. Yay. The biggest release of the week, we've got Dinner for Schmucks. Steve Carell and Paul Rudd. I've actually heard it was really funny, but I heard when it came out that because it was PG-13 it sucked. And I'm kind of used to Paul Rudd and Steve Carell in R-rated mode, so I don't know. I'm kind of avoiding it for a little bit. Other than that, the other big release was The Last Exorcism, the Fox documentary from Lionsgate that came out during the summer, end of August. You know, one of those cheap cash-ins before all the Halloween-themed horror movies were coming out. Still ended up making a huge amount of money. It's the thing with those movies like The Last Exorcism. They cost like not even $1 million to make. They cost like what a documentary would cost to produce. And then you release it as a movie, guaranteed at least $10 million opening weekend, which is making a lot of money off of your movie if it only costs $1 million. So now, as my attention span starts to slowly diminish, let's get to the points we wanted to get to yesterday but didn't have time for. Of course, Casper the Friendly Ghost, everyone should know him. If you haven't seen the Casper movie from 1995, which had Bill Pullman, Christina Ricci, among many others. Eric Idle, come on, Eric Idle, Monty Python. If you haven't seen it for Eric Idle, then you need to go see it for him. Fucking Monty Python. Regardless, Casper, they're going to be bringing it back. Since they released that movie, they went off into the direct-to-video feature where they had Hilary Duff join Casper as Wendy, and then they had the Casper Christmas. They had a few other random ones that just were retarded. So I'm going to be happy to see Casper coming back to the big screen. Maybe they can do it, even if they do it like the 1995 one, and just slightly different. I would watch that same movie remade, actually. Especially if they kept Dan Aykroyd in his Ghostbusters appearance in that, because that was the shit. But regardless, they're going to be bringing that slowly but surely back to the big screen, so we'll have more news on that as it develops. Now, it is the build-up to Super Bowl season. So we've got the last month going into the big game. So we've got a rundown of the wild cards from both sides going into the last couple weeks of the playoffs. Let's start on the AFC side. This weekend we will see the New York Jets take on the Indianapolis Colts. Winner of that game will take on the Pittsburgh Steelers next weekend. And then you also have the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. Whoever wins that is going on to take on the New England Patriots. So pretty much, the question should be, who do we think the New England Patriots are going to face on the AFC Conference Championship? The Jets, the Colts, or the Steelers? And honestly, I think the Jets are going to be eliminated early out of that. As much as I hate Peyton, the Jets have been too wishy-washy. And then from there, it's going to be between the Colts and the Steelers, whoever can step up and not suck the most that game. Meanwhile, on the NFC side of things, this weekend we've got the New Orleans Saints taking on the Seattle Seahawks. Saints might be defending Super Bowl champions, but they haven't looked like it the last couple weeks. Whoever wins that game is going to go on to take on the Chicago Bears. The Bears! Meanwhile, the other wild card spot, you've got Green Bay Packers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Whoever wins that is going to go on to take on the Atlanta Falcons. Really, that one, I'm gonna pull for the Bears. I'm thinking maybe you'll have another Bears Green Bay in there, with the winner of that going on to take on either the Patriots or, most likely the Steelers, because I fucking hate Peyton and I like the Jets. Both those teams are gonna suck. So that is what the playoffs look like at the moment. Obviously, the later brackets are a little bit blank, but after this next weekend, where we'll have some wild card teams out and some moving on, we'll have a little bit better idea of what to expect for the rest of the season, at least the postseason. We will keep covering that right up through the big game, the Super Bowl this year. We will also keep covering the daily box office and movie news. If you haven't been invited to join us, this is your chance. Make sure to check us out Monday through Friday. You can either go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dizzlemits, or you can just click on the username Dizzlemits, and it'll go right there. We've got at least 20-plus episodes of the Daily Dizzle archive. In addition to that, we also have at least 20 to 30 music montage videos. Sometimes you can't refuse a good highlight summary of a movie. We've got plenty of movies that plenty of people have liked. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Superbad, High Fidelity, Grosse Point Blank, Freddy vs. Jason. There's plenty that you should be able to go through and at least be able to find one that you might not hate. So in the meantime, till our next episode tomorrow, be sure to keep checking us out, Dizzlemits on YouTube. Hopefully we'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget to pass it along to your friends and spread the word about us, because we're not going anywhere. So get used to it. As always, I'm Tommy Dizzlemits. We thank you for joining us for the Daily Dizzle. We will see you tomorrow.